Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to, well, we're diving into the world of Islamic finance.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so we're going to be looking at specifically the principles of Islamic finance,
Sure.
how it's kind of evolved over time, and how the public perceives it.
Yeah.
And you've sent over some really intriguing material for this deep dive,
Hmm.
including excerpts from a YouTube interview with Najib Al-Aswad.
Oh, yeah.
Now, Najib Al-Aswad is like a leading Islamic finance consultant.
Okay.
And he was featured on this channel called Kestrel, Muslim Money app.
I've heard of that channel.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool channel.
Yeah.
And with like decades of experience in this field,
Wow.
he's got some serious insights to share.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear what he has to say.
Me too.
Yeah.
So let's jump right in.
Right.
So one of the things that really stood out to me was this question that seems to come up all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's like just how Islamic finance.
Right, yeah.
It's this debate that goes beyond just simple definitions. It really gets into the core of how Islamic principles are being applied,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe even you could say adapted in today's like really complex financial systems.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So on one hand,
Yeah.
you have, those who are advocating for this very strict,
Right.
by-the-book interpretation of Sharia law.
Okay.
And when we say Sharia law, we're talking about the Islamic legal system is derived from religious precepts.
Got it. Yeah.
Yeah. They want to apply that very strictly to all financial matters.
Yeah.
But then you have,
Mm.
I guess, the other side of the coin, those who see a need for a more contextual approach.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's where like our source material gets really interesting.
Oh, I'm interested to hear this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Najib Al-Aswad,
Mm-hmm.
he makes this really compelling case for contextual adaptation.
Okay.
He argues that, Islamic jurisprudence, especially concerning transactions, finance, and trade,
Right.
it's not static.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's always been evolving.
I mean,
And he says that for Islam to truly thrive in like the modern world,
mm-hmm.
it needs to be flexible enough to address like all these complexities of these contemporary financial systems.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
And what's really cool
Hmm.
is that he doesn't just speak in like these generalities.
Okay.
He brings up a very specific example.
Oh, I like examples.
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
To illustrate his point.
Okay.
And the example is the concept of a limited liability company or an LTD.
Oh, the LTD. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
So, historically, if we look back,
Mm.
Islamic partnerships, they always entailed full personal liability.
Right.
But this whole LTD structure, which limits liability,
Yeah.
that wouldn't have been acceptable centuries ago.
Yeah. I see where you're going with this.
Right. So now imagine a world where Muslims just couldn't form LTDs.
Okay.
It would be chaos.
It would be economic chaos.
Right.
Yeah. No, for
So
sure.
that in essence, the LTD, it kind of demonstrates how Islamic finance can adapt while like staying true to its core values.
Okay, I see that. Yes,
Right. But
yes.
this whole idea of adaptation does sometimes lead to compromises.
Right.
That's where that debate about how Islamic is, it truly gets kind of heated.
Exactly.
Right. And what I found really insightful is that
Yeah.
Najib, he points out that Islamic finance often mirrors the existing financial landscape
Okay.
by offering Sharia-compliant alternatives
Mhm.
to conventional products.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And he brings up things like green finance
Yeah.
and ESG investing.
Oh, yeah.
Now, those are trends that actually originated in conventional finance,
Mm-hmm.
but they've been adopted by Islamic institutions.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's really interesting.
So then it begs the question, if Islamic finance is constantly adapting
Yeah.
and mirroring conventional finance,
Right.
are we just slapping a halal label on existing products?
Right. Yeah.
Like, is that a little disingenuous?
Yeah, that's a valid concern.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Najib acknowledges this perception,
Okay.
especially
Yeah.
when it comes to the cost and user experience of Islamic financial products
Right.
in certain markets.
Okay.
And he specifically mentions complaints about Islamic mortgages being more expensive
Oh.
than conventional ones in the UK.
Okay.
So let's unpack this
Okay.
this whole mortgage dilemma.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you might be surprised to learn that
Mhm.
the structure of an Islamic mortgage
Yeah.
is vastly different from a conventional one.
Okay. How so?
So in a conventional mortgage, you're basically taking out a loan
Right.
with interest.
With interest. Yeah.
But
yeah.
Najib explains that Islamic mortgages, they often use this structure called wakala.
Wakala. Okay.
Have you heard of that?
I've heard of it, but I don't know much about it.
Okay, so wakala basically translates to like an investment agency arrangement.
Oh, okay.
So imagine
Yeah.
partnering with the bank
Mm-hmm.
to buy a house.
Yeah, okay.
They manage the purchase,
Mm-hmm.
and you both share in the eventual profit when it's sold.
Oh, okay. So it's kind of like a partnership.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
And there's no fixed interest involved.
No fixed interest. Okay.
Interesting.
So
Yeah,
this distinction, it's not just about like paperwork.
right.
It impacts like how the funds are used,
Yeah.
the nature of the return,
Mm-hmm.
and the overall Sharia compliance framework.
Right. Yeah, makes sense.
And it gets even more intricate when we start talking about Islamic savings accounts.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
So in the UK, Islamic banks have to comply with something called the Financial Services Compensation Scheme, or FSCS.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard of that.
Now, that guarantees deposits.
Oh.
But this actually creates a bit of a conflict
How so?
because under strict Sharia law,
Hmm.
guaranteeing capital in an investment arrangement
Okay.
is problematic.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So it's like these Islamic institutions, they're
Yeah.
constantly walking this tightrope.
Trying to balance these modern financial regulations with these centuries-old religious principles.
That makes a lot of sense.
Now, hold on a second.
Yeah.
Isn't saying that guarantees don't apply under Sharia law
Right.
a little bit of a loophole?
Yeah.
Like, what does that say about their commitment to these principles?
It's a valid point.
Right.
Yeah.
It really demonstrates the
Yeah.
complexities
Yeah.
that these Islamic scholars and institutions,
Right.
they're grappling with.
You're constantly dealing with this.
Right.
Yeah.
So to address this, some Islamic banks,
Yeah.
they'll actually use disclaimers in their terms and conditions.
Oh, really?
They'll state that they're legally obligated to offer the FSCS guarantee,
Right.
but
Right.
it wouldn't hold up under Sharia law if the bank failed.
Okay, interesting. So they're kind of like covering both bases.
Exactly. And it's fascinating how these seemingly small details
Right.
actually reveal this deeper commitment
Okay.
to aligning with Islamic principles.
That's a good point.
But it brings us to another important question.
Okay, what's that?
If Islamic finance is truly beneficial,
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't it be marketed to a wider audience?
Right. Not just Muslims.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a great question.
So this is where Najib's perspective gets really interesting.
Okay.
He believes the focus should be on the economic values and benefits of Islamic finance.
Oh, okay.
So things like
Yeah.
financial inclusion,
Right.
attracting foreign direct investment,
Mhm.
and promoting ethical practices.
Okay, so it's not just about the religious aspect of it.
Exactly. Less about faith,
Yeah.
more about the tangible benefits.
Gotcha.
Right.
Yeah.
And he uses this example of former Prime Minister David Cameron
Oh, wow.
advocating for Islamic finance.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So Cameron championed Islamic finance as a tool for financial inclusion,
Okay.
attracting investments from countries like Kuwait and Indonesia,
Mm-hmm.
and building economic bridges between nations.
Mm-hmm.
So even a British Prime Minister
Yeah.
saw the value in Islamic finance.
That's fascinating.
Right.
Yeah.
But attracting a wider audience
Yeah.
also means we have to address this perception of higher costs.
Right.
So how do we do that?
Yeah.
Well, that's where highlighting the inherent stability and resilience
Yeah, okay.
of Islamic financial institutions becomes really crucial.
That makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
And for example,
Okay.
Najib argues that Islamic finance, when done correctly,
Okay.
could have prevented crises like the subprime mortgage meltdown
Wow, really?
because it prohibits that kind of risky debt bundling
Oh, I see.
that led to that crisis.
Right.
It all goes back to that very foundation of Islamic finance,
Yeah.
risk sharing.
Okay.
So you see this principle, which is central to Islamic finance,
Hmm.
it's evolved alongside financial instruments
Okay.
from simple partnerships
Right.
to these complex structures,
Okay.
like sukuk bonds.
Sukuk bonds. Yeah, I've heard of those.
So we've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
Yeah. That fundamental question of how Islamic is Islamic finance
Right.
to the intricacies of mortgages, and even touched on,
Right.
preventing financial crises.
Right.
But we've only just scratched the surface.
Oh, there's more.
There's so much more to unpack
Okay.
in Najib's interview,
All right.
particularly about public perception
Okay.
and those internal debates
Yeah.
within the Islamic finance community.
All right. I'm ready for more.
Let's get into it.
All right. It's interesting how this perception of Islamic finance keeps coming up like it's less authentic or less pure
Yeah.
than a stricter interpretation of Sharia law.
It's like some people think it's just conventional products with a halal sticker slapped on.
Right. And especially when they see the cost of Islamic mortgages, they get skeptical.
Yeah, but remember, cost is a complex issue.
It is, yeah.
It's influenced by so many different factors.
It's
And, the relative youth of Islamic finance institutions compared to their conventional counterparts.
right.
That often means they just lack the scale and market access
They do, yeah.
to offer products at the same price point.
That's true.
And then there are all the regulatory hurdles.
Oh, yeah, we can't forget about those.
Like we were talking about Islamic banks in the UK
right.
and the challenges they face because of regulations like the FSCS.
Mm,
They have to make these concessions.
yeah.
That might not be ideal from a purely Sharia perspective.
Yeah, but as Najib points out, these challenges also showcase the ingenuity and adaptability of Islamic finance scholars and practitioners.
That's a good point.
They're constantly working to develop solutions that meet the demands of the modern financial system while upholding the requirements of Islamic law.
It's like a puzzle figuring out how to make all the pieces fit.
It is, yeah.
It reminds me of that example Najib gave about early termination fees for Islamic fixed-term deposits.
Oh, yeah, what about those?
So conventional banks might penalize customers for withdrawing early.
Right.
But Islamic banks, they're obligated to offer some return on that invested capital, even if it's less than the full expected profit.
It's a great example of how Islamic finance principles can lead to tangible benefits for consumers.
Totally. And it underscores the importance of understanding the underlying contracts and structures
Yes.
that govern these products instead of just focusing on those superficial similarities.
Exactly. So it's about looking beyond the label and digging into the substance of the transaction.
No shortcuts.
No shortcuts, exactly. And when you do that, you begin to see the significant differences between Islamic and conventional finance, even in products that seem similar on the surface.
Yeah, but this complexity also creates a communication challenge.
It does, yeah.
Trying to explain all these nuances
Yeah,
to a public that's already bombarded with financial jargon
right.
and might not have a deep understanding of Islamic principles.
Precisely. And this is where awareness becomes so crucial.
Education.
Right. As Najib emphasizes educating both Muslims and non-Muslims about the principles and practices of Islamic finance is essential for its growth and acceptance.
Because knowledge is power.
It is, especially when it comes to making those financial decisions.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not just about explaining those technical details.
Right.
It's also about highlighting those ethical values and societal benefits that Islamic finance promotes.
Like we talked about earlier, it's about focusing on the potential of Islamic finance to create a more just and equitable financial system.
Exactly. Remember David Cameron's speech about Islamic finance?
Oh, yeah, when he was prime minister.
Yeah, he talked about its potential for financial inclusion, attracting foreign investment, and building economic bridges between nations.
And those are messages that resonate with a broader audience.
They do. It's about demonstrating those tangible benefits, not just relying on religious appeals.
Show me the money.
Yeah, exactly. And Najib makes a strong case for this approach. He argues it could help Islamic finance break out of its niche market and become a mainstream force for positive change.
That's a powerful vision.
It is.
What if Islamic finance principles were more widely adopted?
Yeah.
Could we have a more stable and equitable financial system, one that's less prone to crises and more focused on serving the needs of real people?
It's a compelling idea, isn't it? It challenges us to look beyond the limitations of the current system and imagine a future where finance is aligned with ethical values and contributes to the well-being of all.
It does.
But let's be realistic.
Okay.
There are some significant obstacles to overcome, both within the Islamic finance industry and in the broader financial landscape.
So what are some of those roadblocks standing in the way of this vision?
Well, one of the key challenges that Najib identifies is the need for greater standardization and harmonization of Sharia interpretations.
Oh, okay.
The lack of a unified global standard can lead to confusion and inconsistency in the application of Islamic finance principles.
Right, and as we discussed earlier, the regulatory environment can also be a major hurdle.
It can, especially in jurisdictions where Islamic finance is relatively new.
It's a constant balancing act, complying with local regulations while upholding Sharia principles.
It is, but despite these challenges, there's a growing sense of optimism within the Islamic finance community.
Oh, that's good to hear.
The industry is evolving rapidly, with new products and technologies emerging all the time.
So innovation is happening.
Yes, and that global demand for ethical and sustainable finance is creating new opportunities for Islamic finance to expand its reach and impact.
I like that.
Najib's insights offer a valuable roadmap for navigating this complex landscape.
Okay.
By focusing on education, innovation, and collaboration, Islamic finance can overcome these challenges and realize its full potential as a force for positive change in the world.
So we've talked about the big picture,
We have.
but now let's zoom in a little.
Okay.
What about those internal debates within the Islamic finance community?
Oh, you mean like,
You know, those discussions about which products are truly Sharia compliant
right.
and which ones are maybe pushing the boundaries, you know, those lively discussions about which products are truly Sharia compliant and which ones are maybe pushing the boundaries. It's like this constant internal audit happening.
Exactly. And Najib brings up this really interesting phenomenon he's observed, especially in the UK.
Oh,
It's like this tension between those traditional Islamic banking institutions and those, newer fintech startups, almost like two different schools of thought kind of bumping heads.
yes, those fintech disruptors.
Yeah.
Shaking things up as usual. It's almost like a generational clash, isn't it?
Yeah, kind of. You've got the established players, right?
Yeah.
They emphasize that rigorous adherence to those traditional Sharia interpretations. And then you have these newcomers who are really pushing for those more innovative and flexible approaches.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
But Najib sees this tension, while sometimes it can get heated, he actually sees it as a sign of a healthy and dynamic industry.
He does. He says it forces both sides to critically examine their assumptions and to try and find those creative solutions that meet the evolving needs of consumers.
So it's not necessarily a bad thing that there are these different opinions and approaches.
Not at all. In fact, Najib, he reminds us of this really beautiful saying. Their consensus is a conclusive evidence, and their differences are expansive mercy.
Wow, that's a powerful statement. What does that mean to you?
Well, to me, it really suggests that having that diversity of thought within Islamic finance can actually lead to greater understanding, and that's a good thing.
Right. More options for Muslims who are out there trying to find those ethical financial solutions.
Precisely. It's about embracing that richness and that dynamism of Islamic jurisprudence while also staying true to those core principles. Justice, fairness, social responsibility, those are key.
Which kind of highlights the importance of individual discernment, right?
Yeah.
As consumers, we need to be informed about the different perspectives within Islamic finance.
Yeah.
We have to make choices that align with our own values and understanding of Sharia.
Absolutely. And Najib, he offers some pretty wise advice. Ask the people of knowledge if you do not know.
So in other words, consult with trusted scholars and experts.
Yep. Do your research, and ultimately, you make those informed decisions based on your own conscience and understanding of Islamic principles.
The world of Islamic finance, it's anything but T-static. It's constantly evolving, adapting, responding to these new challenges and opportunities. Makes you wonder what the future holds.
It really does. It demands intellectual rigor, but also a willingness to engage with all the complexities of the modern world.
So as we kind of wrap up our deep dive into Islamic finance, any key takeaways for our listeners out there? What should they be thinking about as they navigate this landscape?
I think in Najib's emphasis on awareness, that's crucial. Don't be afraid to ask questions, seek out reliable information, and challenge those assumptions. Remember, financial decisions, they're ultimately ethical decisions. Islamic finance gives us this framework to train and align your money with your values.
It's not about getting bogged down in this "how Islamic is it?" debate. Focus on the principles, the substance, and the potential that Islamic finance has to create a more just and equitable financial system for everybody.
Beautifully said. It's not just about avoiding interest. It's about promoting social good, fostering that financial inclusion, and really building a more sustainable and ethical economic future.
It's about recognizing that all those financial choices we make, they have real-world consequences, and we can use our money to make a positive impact.
Exactly. So keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into this world of Islamic finance. You might be surprised by what you find.
You might even be inspired to become part of the movement, to create a financial system that works for everyone, regardless of their faith or background. A system that's rooted in fairness and shared prosperity. Until next time, keep learning,